Tallahassee, Florida. Friday, July 18, 2014. Around 11 a.m., Dan Markel was driving up the driveway of his house and into the garage. Then suddenly gunshots rang out. A neighbor called 911. He went over to Dan Markel's garage and found Dan inside the car, slumped over the steering wheel. The car was running and he had blood all over his head. Dan Markel had taken 2 bullets to the head. His car window smashed, his eyeglasses broken. His assailant's car was backing up and pulling away. The vehicle was light-colored white or silver. The neighbor thought it looked like a Toyota Prius. Dan Markel was taken to hospital but died in the early hours the next day. He was 41 years old. Dan Markel was a law professor at Florida State University. That morning Dan had dropped off his 2 sons at school around 9 a.m. Then he went to the gym for a workout before driving home at around 11 a.m. A lot of different agencies got involved in the case. Leon County State Attorney's Office, Tallahassee Police, and the FBI. They started looking into Dan's life at the university. Any problems with students, co-workers, or anyone at the university? Investigators interviewed his students and fellow faculty members and combed through his email to see if there was any suspicious correspondence. Nothing turned up with his professional life. Investigators look at Dan's personal life. Dan had been married to a fellow lawyer and professor at FSU, Wendi Adelson. She was from South Florida, from a family of well-to-do dentists. The couple had 2 sons and began raising them in Tallahassee. But after 6 years, Wendi and Dan began to have problems. In September 2012, while Dan was away traveling for work, Wendi packed up the kids and left divorce papers on the bed. Wendi got her own place in Tallahassee and a bitter divorce and custody battle ensued. Wendi Adelson wanted to take the children with her and move closer to her family in South Florida, about 6-7 hours away. Family law court ruled against her because the children had a stable environment in Tallahassee. And the father, being resident in Tallahassee, can participate fully with the raising of the children. Wendi stayed in Tallahassee with the boys as the court required. The divorce from Dan became final in 2013. But the custody arrangement remained a sore point on both sides. They had 50-50 sharing arrangement with kids. According to court documents, Wendi was finding Dan's demands unreasonable, so Dan filed a motion for a hearing to work the issues out with a judge. Dan was killed before that hearing could happen. Now, police were about to talk to Wendi. You can watch her interview on YouTube. Main points from that interview. 1. She had an alibi. 2. She gave the name Jeffrey Lacoste to police. He was someone she had been dating. Jeffrey is an associate professor at FSU. You can watch his police interview is on YouTube. 3. She told police about a long-running joke in the Adelson family. Charlie Adelson, brother of Wendi, would joke that he had looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel, but it was cheaper to get her a TV. Tallahassee police took photos and swabbed Wendi's hands for gunshot residue. None was found. Also, her alibi checked out, so she could not have shot her ex-husband. Wendi told police that she had been dating Jeffrey Lacoste since the end of October the previous year. She said they had a fight at the end of June. Now Jeffrey Lacoste had an alibi. He was 500 miles away in Tennessee when Dan was shot. Money was offered for information leading to arrest and conviction. The amount had increased to $100,000 by July 17, 2015, the 1-year anniversary of Dan's murder. In the end, it was a mistake the killers made that led to their whole thing falling apart. Dan Markel's neighbor had seen a car leaving the crime scene. The police were able to use surveillance cameras from buses and businesses to ultimately identify the killers. On the day of the homicide, you can actually see the killer's vehicle, a Prius, pull up to a bank's ATM. The Prius was rented by Luis Rivera. He used his real name to rent the car. Once that link was made, the dominoes started to fall, and the whole murder for hire blew up in the Adelsons' faces. So far, the people convicted for Dan Markel's murder are Luis Rivera, Sigfredo Garcia, Katherine Magbanua, Charlie Adelson. Donna Adelson has been arrested and is awaiting trial. An interesting question is whether Wendi Adelson will end up in jail. Jeffrey Lacoste is convinced he was being set up as the killer. You can listen to his testimonies and draw your own conclusion. The links Wendi was trying to create might end up being the evidence that will do her in. It might not be enough to land her in jail, but she may be charged. Here are the links. 1. The Friday Dan Markel was killed. Jeff Lacasse was going to drive to Tennessee around 11 a.m., the time of the murder. His cell phone signal would have placed him in the area. There is a discussion about whether his car, a silver Nissan Sentra, is closed enough to the Prius to make that link. On the Monday before the Friday killing, Wendi met up with Jeff and she was very interested in whether he was still going on that business trip and what time he was leaving. Luckily for Jeff and unbeknownst to Wendi, Jeff made a last-minute change. He decided to leave Thursday night instead of the Friday morning, giving Jeff an alibi in Tennessee. If he did not make that change, police would have focused on him and build evidence against him. They would have thought they've got their man. There would have been no need to track down the Prius. They might have assumed the neighbor made a mistake about the make and model. They would not have retraced Dan Markel's travels that day and searched for clues, which led them to identify the killer's rental car. 2. According to Jeff Lacasse, during the 9 months he and Wendi dated, he only took 2 business trips. The first one was in June, the month before the murder. The killers were going to do the hit that day. It did not happen because the car they had hired only allowed local travel. When the GPS on the car notified the rental company that it had gone beyond that, the hitmen turned around and drove back. The second trip was the day of the murder. There are other links such as the conversations he and Wendi had, but no doubt the defense will paint Jeff as a jilted lover, feeling rejected and making up stories to get back at Wendi. The first link that sunk them all is the rental car. Remember, if they can link you, they can sink you.